Internet.
A stream online.
TNT Radio.live. Today's News Talk Radio. TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. We're in hour number 2 of this live broadcast. Appreciate you guys hanging with us here on Friday. Great to have you with us. And also a big thank you to everybody in the TNT chat community. We see the numbers growing in there. So great to see you guys. Really appreciate your participation there as well. Now, our next guest is a fantastic independent journalist. He's also been on the ground in a number of conflict zones, very experienced journalist, and also a managing editor of a leading publication, the Grayzone, at the moment. And just continuing on our theme for this program today, also a target of censorship, but also smear campaigns by the mainstream media, and in some cases by foreign lobbies like the Israeli lobby, wielding an unbelievable amount of influence in Washington. Wyatt Reed joining us right now on the live link. Wyatt, really appreciate you joining us this week on TNT.
Great to be here, Patrick. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Wyatt, I saw, this story that came out with you. I mean, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised, even by the Washington Post standards. This was a little bit wild and unhinged. We'll bring this article up on screen here. This is the news. The news story, if you want to call it that. News sites, editors' ties to Iran, Russia show misinformation's complexity. This is, I guess, one of these think pieces, Wyatt, that we're seeing where the mainstream's trying to figure out how to solve this problem of disinformation out in the internet world. And they've chosen you, among other targets, to focus on here, and you immediately came back swinging on this with the counterpunch. I mean, if you want to talk about actual disinformation, you just have to look at the contents of this article itself. Is itself disinformation, and I think worse than that, it's intentionally designed to discredit you and other independent journalists, ones who have taken risks and reported on the ground from places where you will not find Western mainstream media journalists. Wyatt, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, thanks again for having me on. You're right. This is absolutely a warning shot. This is meant, I think, to signal to independent journalists that even if you kind of play by the rules, you know, as long as you are pumping out factual journalism that is actually challenging the status quo, there will always be a target on your back. No matter how many of the, hoops you jump through, there's always going to be that will be the real barometer, I think, in some senses, right? And so journalists like yourself, obviously, and myself, we find ourselves on Ukrainian government, U.S. State Department sponsored hit lists. We find ourselves on all types of bizarre lists. For me, this was the first time that I've ever had a full article about me. Personally, it was kind of bizarre, waking up to and reading this. It felt a little bit surreal that, they are actually coming after me for my appearances on a Iranian news outlet 3 or 4 years ago, a couple dozen appearances. They are, because of these appearances, that I never hid, by the way. I openly advertised on my social media. Here's my latest report for Press TV. Described myself on social media at the time as a correspondent for Press TV. But here they are acquiring a series of hacked documents, supposedly acquired by the MEK, which is a terrorist anti-Iranian group that was listed by the United States and the European Union on their terror list until about 10 years ago. This information, these hacked documents, supposedly acquired by the MEK, which has extremely strong ties to Israeli intelligence. So who's to say who is really behind this? These documents were then passed on to a shady FBI collaborator named Neil Rauhauser, who is a very strange creature. He, by all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, he should be in jail. He owes $75,000 in child support. He's dodged a number of arrest warrants, and yet he is cited in this Washington Post article as a activist disinformation researcher instead of any of these other points of interest about this man. So this is kind of gives you a sense for who else they're relying on to basically come up right into the point of accusing the Grayzone of being funded by Iran and by Russia, because because correspondents, myself, we used to work for Sputnik News at some point in time, because if you're an independent journalist in the United States and you are not willing to suck up to Jeff Bezos and you are not willing to just regurgitate whatever line they want you to parrot, you don't have real options in terms of employment. There are only a handful of independent journalistic outlets and outlets like Sputnik, Press TV that are willing to pay journalists for journalism. So because of all this, right, they are dredging this up now, 4 years later, journalism that I never hid. And the question is why? Why are they coming after me? Why are they not? And why do they not mention that dozens of other Americans have worked with this outlet, work to this day with this outlet? Why is it that they're coming after me? And I think the answer has to do with my new outlet, the Grayzone. We have been uncovering a lot of stories that I think the mainstream media and their owners would prefer not be exposed. We've exposed the so-called Hamas rape hoax. We have thoroughly discredited that concept from public consciousness. We know that there are bigger targets coming after us. We know that there are larger groups that have it in for us now because we've exposed so many lies, be that in the current Israeli genocide being conducted in Gaza or the deep state, the Biden administration's proxy war with Russia. We've been uncovering these things, just like yourself, Patrick. And I think we're at a moment now where it's not just about Julian Assange. I think they're willing to kind of come after basically anybody who exposes their lies.
And we'll put your tweet response to this Washington Post story up online. You kind of quote tweeted Kit Clarenberg, your colleague here, if we put that up on screen. But you're basically saying these so-called journalists attempting to get you jailed for journalism just had to issue a major correction to their hit piece. Expect more in the coming days as we expose the U.S. government cutouts, pro-Israeli zealots, and federal informants they relied on to target us. And you guys did a very good job of counterpunching, I think, very quickly on this, Wyatt. It wasn't that difficult because they really exposed themselves. I mean, to have the MEK as like one of your chief sources for a hit piece, I mean, this reeks of a level of desperation that it's not a credible organization. Even among the Iranian opposition in exile, they don't even like the MEK anymore. They're hauled up in a camp in Albania. They've got the sort of limousine branch in Paris, and then they go around the United States trying to basically get rich Iranian expats to write big checks for congressmen and senators who are keynote speakers at their event, who are promising that the MEK is going to be marching through the Arc de Triomphe in Tehran next year. They do it all. That's the whole shtick of the MEK. It's kind of a giant money laundering operation at this point, but they're hardly credible. And that's the thing. I think this really reeks of desperation, Wyatt. It's almost like you couldn't pull a better card. You couldn't find a better card in the deck to pull than this. It's kind of shocking.
Right. And that's the deep irony here, is that without fail, basically every single source that they rely on to come after us, to try to discredit us, to tar us as more or less Iranian spies, right, or Russian spies. That's basically what they're getting at. And that was how it was reprinted in Israeli media subsequently. There was a headline in I-24, the Israeli outlet, saying, pro-Hamas Grayzone outlet funded by Iran and Russia. Just ludicrous lies, right? But this is what was implied. This is what was suggested by the piece, and this is what, as Caitlin Johnstone described as the empire's information warriors all seized on to this flimsy, since corrected article. The very first line had to be corrected because that's how flimsy of an article it was. But that was kind of the point. I think they knew that they would have to walk it back. They were just going to shoot this out there into the public consciousness, have people like Rabbi Shmuley and Rabbi Abraham Cooper and Nina Jankowicz, the head of the Disinformation Governance Board, all seize onto this and be like, oh, see, now we have proof that the gray zone is actually funded by Iran, a total lie. And they're using this proof, quote unquote, which is obviously not proof, it's a manufactured lie. They're using that to demand subpoenas and federal investigations and even a bipartisan hearing of Congress to investigate the gray zone, right? And that just shows you, I think, yeah, again, to your point, Patrick, how desperate they are at this point, that they're willing to come after me for journalism several years ago that they don't like for the wrong outlet, and try to throw me in jail over this, try to potentially criminalize me and force me to pay potentially millions of dollars for journalism. And the other irony here, right, is that everyone they rely on for this article, whether that be the Atlantic Council or this lawyer, this supposed sanctions lawyer, who's really kind of a personal grievance lawyer for the anti-Iranian regime change lobby, represents people like Masih Ahmadinejad. That's their sanctions expert that they relied on, because I think they probably called a bunch of actual sanctions lawyers and they told them, well, this is not a very cut and dry case and there's a lot of free speech considerations at play here. But instead they went with this guy with an obvious axe to grind. And we're talking about people who have all taken vastly more sums from the United States government, from the Israeli government, from a handful of governments that I'm being accused of in this article of taking. They of not taking, of getting paid for my journalism, right? We're talking about Masih Ahmadinejad, right? Not cited directly in this article, but she's received over $300,000 from Voice of America, a United States government propaganda outlet. Nobody seems to have any qualms about quoting her. Nobody has any qualms about quoting the Atlantic Council, which is directly funded by the United States government. All of these groups that they relied on have very clear motivations and very clear biases, and none of this was commented on in the article, of course. Because the point is not to tell the truth for them. Democracy does die in darkness, and it dies at their own hand when they refuse to divulge who they're relying on for this, and try to paint us instead, the independent journalists, as agents of disinformation, foreign disinformation. No, it's you. You guys are the ones. CNN. You have to, if you're publishing anything from CNN's Jerusalem bureau, you have to check it with the Israeli government. That you are serving as agents of foreign propaganda, not us. My job at the Gray Zone was funded completely by our viewers and our supporters, who are not governments. We don't accept any funds from governments. In fact, we don't allow people to moonlight for U.S. government agencies or U.S. cutouts like the NED or like the Atlantic Council. We would not allow somebody like that to work with us, and that's again the difference between us and them, and that's part of the reason why they're trying so hard, I think, to shut us down.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about foreign funding, the Atlantic Council is there's a bevy of Gulf state donors, other countries and interests, corporate as well. So they're hardly independent. I mean, a lot of people regard the Atlantic Council as a CIA cutout, and rightfully so. But it's interesting. Fun fact about the MEK, again, as you said, Wyatt, they were a proscribed terrorist organization up until, I don't know, around 2012 when I think it was, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, I believe, took them off the list and opened the floodgates for the cash to flow to U.S. congressmen and senators to champion the MEK cause. But the irony is, Wyatt, that what the Washington Post is saying here, This is a hack and leak operation by the MEK. That's exactly what they accused the Russians of doing with the Hunter Biden laptop, which turned out to be a hoax. There was no Russian disinformation operation. The Hunter Biden laptop was real, but it was sold by the U.S. agencies to Twitter and so forth as a hack and leak operation, ergo to preempt the censorship when the story actually came out. So it's funny that they would use the exact same thing, even worse, a former terrorist organization, as their source. I mean, this is just unbelievable.
And I will say there's another layer to the irony here, which is that several years ago, before I joined the Grayzone, Max Blumenthal, our editor-in-chief, exposed the fact that Reuters had been taking funds directly from the British government in order to conduct basically anti-Russian propaganda initiatives in former Soviet bloc states and try to kind of vaccinate them against this Russian disinformation by seeding, supposedly anti-authoritarian journalistic initiatives. Right. And that was exposed through documents that it was claimed were hacked, that probably were hacked, though we don't know who exactly hacked them. But the powers that be decided that they had been hacked by the Russians. And for publishing these documents, Twitter actually wrote out an entirely new label on Twitter saying, warning, these documents may have been acquired via hacking. And so every time you shared it, it was this big label right at the bottom. Bloop, you might be sharing hacked documents, and you even had to click through. Are you sure you want to share these hacked documents? And it was the ultimate Streisand effect, because it became the highest hits on any article that the Grayzone had put out in years, because people realized you could just include this link and post your own image, and it became a meme. It became the meme of the day on Twitter. People said, "Oh, warning, these documents may be hacked," and it's like some picture of like Alvin and the Chipmunks getting head or something, and it's like this ridiculous meme that got all these gamers ran with it. And so that was what the last time that we kind of had a back and forth with mainstream media kind of channels over hacked documents, was that they rolled out a entirely new label on Twitter specifically to try to stop people from sharing this article, and it totally backfired. But now, of course, nobody has any qualms with relying on hacked emails, my hacked emails, to try to allow some supposed journalist to try to get another journalist thrown in jail for reporting on inconvenient narratives.
Well, they're really weaponizing. The mainstream media is weaponizing their role as press outlets. And myself, I've been a victim of this. Yourself, all of your colleagues, pretty much at the Grayzone, and a bunch of other people you probably know and have worked with in the past, have ended up on all these various lists and targeted in these various exposés by these same outlets. And then they hand these lists over to government agencies or to big tech firms, to Google, to YouTube. We don't know the extent of how much of the censorship, the shadow banning, the debanking, the cancellation of independent journalists are. We don't know the full extent of it because we only have access to some of these emails from the Twitter files with Elon Musk. Those were made public, but not. What about Google? What about YouTube? What about LinkedIn? What about Meta, Facebook, and Instagram? I mean, so this is a huge issue. We know this is happening here. So my experience has been these lists have been used to give some sort of official grounding to banning and canceling people, Wyatt. So there is actually a reason for these articles. They end up in files and they're used to justify persecuting or canceling people like yourself. Go ahead.
Well, and as the journalist Mark Ames pointed out, these kinds of articles are used to justify behind closed doors people attempting to pull kind of FISA warrants, for example, right? being able to all of a sudden have the legal justification to be able to surveil American journalists and read all of their communications simply because some foreign outlet like I-24, this Israeli outlet, is directly accusing us of being funded by Iran and Russia, which is a total lie. But it may be a lie, but that doesn't stop it from being immediately reposted, rebroadcast throughout the Twitter sphere, reutilized on our Wikipedia page. It was within 24 hours that our Wikipedia page was just basically a collection of lies, the worst things you can imagine saying about someone. You're not allowed to edit our Wikipedia page, by the way. I would invite the audience to try and just see exactly how long you manage to get away with that before you get permanently banned from editing Wikipedia. All of this to say, basically, you know this, your audience knows this. We're not gonna blow anyone's minds when we say that they're trying to shut us down, and this is their only way of doing so right now. And if they are unsuccessful with this one, I have no doubts we'll see another Washington Post hit piece. This is the second one this year that's attacked us at the Grayzone, right? But as Mark Ames said, you know, the disinformation hex that they're trying to cast on the Grayzone hasn't appeared to have much of an effect. So they're ginning up these outrageous, slanderous stories that they immediately have to retract the central claims of, because they've run out of ways to try to dismiss us from the conversation. They're upset that people like Elon Musk will engage with us on the question of whether or not Bellingcat is funded by the United States government. It is. They're upset that we have an entree into any of the mainstream media conversation at all, even if we are immediately dismissed whenever they bring up our points. They're upset that they have to talk about us at all. They're upset that we have exposed numerous Washington Post reporters as basically being overt pro-Israel partisans who are not journalists in any real sense of the word. They're upset about so much, and this is the only defense that they seem to be able to muster, is just to try to slander and libel the rest of us.
Yeah, and it is a great job Grayzone has done to expose a lot of the lies of October 7th. I've cited yourself, Electronic Intifada, and a few other independent media outlets just to debunk some of the claims made by the Israeli government and their media about what actually happened on October 7th. It's such an important issue because this was used as a justification for this basically scorched earth policy that Israel has implemented, killing tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians. So it's not an insignificant detail. And the New York Times were really caught out, weren't they, on this? They had to issue a traction. I think somebody got let go. Mysterious authors appearing, commandeering these stories for these outlets. All of a sudden, clearly, these are Israeli influence operations. Your thoughts on that New York Times story that was kind of used as the kind of, the bedrock of that whole Hamas mass rape hoax. So go ahead, Wyatt.
Yeah, I think the original article has headlines something like "Screams Without Words," and it was this harrowing sort of saga of all of these supposed victims of the Hamas's alleged weaponized campaign of rape that they used, allegedly, according to the New York Times, to just terrorize the Israeli populace on October 7th. It all sounded perfectly plausible until you looked into who exactly they were citing. And it was alleged witness after alleged witness was either directly linked to the IDF, to the Israeli military, in many cases directly to propaganda units, or were linked to some of these so-called rescue groups who were on the verge of bankruptcy prior to October 7th, and then were suddenly flush with millions of dollars of cash because they fundraised off of so many absurd claims of babies being baked in ovens, the 40 beheaded babies hoax that Biden himself repeated. All of these absolute lies that were subsequently exposed by outlets like the Grayzone and Electronic Intifada and many others. But the damage, just like in the case of their hit piece on us and me personally, the damage is done already. They know that by the time they correct the record, that narrative is out there and it's already being used to justify real slaughter, real genocide. And unfortunately, we are not armed with billion-dollar media cabals. We cannot dictate our narrative on our perspective and simply have it absorbed by masses of people and appear on their iPhones and appear on every screen that they're looking at. All we have on our side is the truth. In this case, it seems that was powerful enough to prompt a lot of soul searching by a number of New York Times staffers who were unwilling to basically present their follow-up on this. They were supposed to come out with a follow-up podcast episode on the alleged mass rape campaign supposedly carried out by Hamas. But because of reporting that we and other independent outlets did, there was a lot of internal dissent at the New York Times, where some of the up-and-coming journalists, some of them probably Muslim, some of them with friends, Palestinian friends, they said, hold on, these stories that people like Grayzone have been putting out seem to be legitimate, and they present all types of questions that we are apparently unable to answer. And instead of having kind of a come to Jesus moment and saying, all right, let's grapple with how this actually played out and our impact as one of supposedly the United States' leading newspaper, let's grapple with what we've done and what we said, whether it was right or wrong. They instead quashed the entire podcast. That was simply not, they decided we're not going to air this. And so the record was never set straight. They basically, instead of recognizing what they'd done, they decided to basically hide, and they made the decision, I think, at probably a fairly high up level of the organization, that it's better to simply ignore this issue, pretend it never happened, than to own up to their role in all this. And that's sadly typical of so much of the so-called Fourth Estate, is that instead of examining these lies, instead of serving as any real check or balance on the U.S. government and its ostensible allies overseas, they simply regurgitate whatever they're told. And anybody who steps out of line, as many journalists and mainstream media outlets have been since October 7th, is simply fired or dismissed. They get the Phil Donahue treatment in the Iraq War era. For being right, their reward is getting fired. And that's, I think, tells you everything you need to know about what the role is of these establishment legacy media outlets.
I'm here with Wyatt Reed, managing editor of the Grayzone. We're talking about the smear campaign waged against him, but just generally the malaise of the mainstream media and the role they play in front-running propaganda for some of the biggest events in human history. What's happened in Gaza over the last 8 months is biblical, and to see U.S. outlets running point on major propaganda operations is quite breathtaking, to say the least. Now, Wyatt, we were talking about censorship, the smear campaigns waged against you, all your colleagues as well at the Grayzone have been targets of this, victims of this sort of treatment from the various U.S. government actors embedded in these agencies, along with mainstream media themselves. But there's another subtle form of censorship that a lot of people aren't aware of, and this is what goes on a platform like Wikipedia. We spoke to the former founder, Larry Sanger, about this, and he admitted that a lot of the functions of Wikipedia have been gamed by bigger institutions. Now, censorship is rife on this platform. Subjects and pages are managed. There's a lot of smears actually against journalists and pejoratives that are put in on pages about independent journalists and so forth, war correspondents, etc. I'm going to play this video here. This is the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett caught on camera here talking openly about what the Israeli government do to help manage the narrative on this massive platform like Wikipedia. Let's go ahead and watch this. I want to get your reaction.
Moetzet Yesha, in conjunction with My Israel, has arranged Instruction Day for wiki editors. The goal of the day is to teach people how to edit in Wikipedia, which is the #1 source of information today in the world. As a way of example, if someone searches the Gaza flotilla, we want to be there. We want to be the guys who influence what is written there, how it's written, and to ensure that it's balanced and Zionist in nature.
I came here to learn more about how we as Israelis and as Jews can defend Israel online, on the internet, and particularly in Wikipedia in this case. Wikipedia is a bit of a complex system, and it's sometimes hard to figure out the rules. I've personally tried to edit things in Wikipedia that were against Israel, small things, and my changes were erased or undone, and I didn't understand why. And I think that this kind of knowledge is important for anyone who wants to be active in defending Israel on the internet, so that we can go and we can see the information and we can say this isn't quite right. It's showing one side of the story, and I have the power and the right to change that. And in general, it's so important for us to be online, working to defend ourselves and to prove to the world and to ourselves that we are just and we are right. And because right now, if you look online, if you do searches for certain terms related to Israel, it's just filled with anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and garbage. And there's not enough of us out there working to counteract that and make sure that the other side of the story, our side of the story, and our right side of the story is getting the right coverage and the coverage that it needs. So this type of initiative and initiatives like that to educate and promote defense of Israel online are extremely important, and I hope we'll see more of this in the future.
Okay, well, look, listen, Wyatt, it's right there. And they even said the word Zionism more than once. That's an ideology. That shows you this isn't just about objective facts. Go ahead, Wyatt.
Yeah, the former prime minister gave it away when he said, we want it to be balanced and Zionist in nature. You can't have both. You cannot have it be objectively steeped in Zionism and balanced. Right. So they're giving up the game here. They're saying we are conducting workshops in how to carry out propaganda on the internet because our side of the story, the fact that we are carrying out a genocide is bleeding through. And this interview we're listening to, that's from about 10 years ago. Right. And since then, the facts on the ground in terms of the information war that Zionists want to wage have not changed in their favor. They have changed dramatically against their favor. You have more and more people, especially young people in the United States, who want nothing to do with Zionism, and especially young Jews in the United States who want not more than anything to not be associated with this genocide that is being carried out ostensibly in their name right now. And so we can only expect that as this kind of information war has intensified, that these same actors have been doing the exact same thing on a much larger scale. There's a funny irony here in that you as a person are not allowed, you as a random audience member are not allowed to go just run amok on Wikipedia and say, here's my perspective, here's my ideology. I'm going to stamp that all over Wikipedia and show that I have an obviously biased perspective in favor of one side or the other. You get banned very quickly. That doesn't seem to be happening with Israeli propagandists who are openly bragging about their desire to go carry out Hasbara all over the so-called free encyclopedia. And so this October 7th article, the al-Nusrait massacre, in which the supposed humanitarian pier that the U.S. military constructed for hundreds of millions of dollars and never managed to deliver more than a few 100 tons of aid, and was subsequently used as basically a base of operations for the Israeli military to carry out their hostage operation, where they slaughtered nearly 300 Palestinians in order to rescue 4 Israelis. That article is listed online as the Nusret rescue operation, right? It is not described as the Nusret massacre. In just the same way that the United States' invasion of a number of countries is described as an intervention or a war, whereas Russia's invasion of Ukraine is obviously the title. The names of Wikipedia articles themselves kind of give up the game too. They're very clearly promoting a Western government, a NATO-friendly perspective, and that becomes obvious if you spend any time on them. And in terms of our own Wikipedia page, the Wikipedia page on the Grayzone, it is perhaps the most defamatory article that's ever been written about us. Every single word is a lie, a half lie, an exaggeration, some form of bending the truth in order to paint us as foreign propagandists again and again. None of our groundbreaking independent investigative journalism is mentioned. None of these stories that we've broken or covered for the first time, none of that makes it. And the former British ambassador to, I believe, Uzbekistan, Craig Murray, has made quite an interesting investigation into who exactly is it that is editing anti-imperialists' Wikipedia pages. And I encourage your audience to look up the name Philip Cross. If you Google Craig Murray and Philip Cross, you will see exactly who is editing our Wikipedia pages, and it appears to be a British intelligence operation. They account Philip Cross, one of the most prolific, top 10 at the time of this article's writing, one of the most prolific Wikipedia editors in its history, who edited this person, Philip Cross, alleged person, edited exclusively between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. British time, never taking a day off, holidays, working through holidays, religiously slandering anti-imperialists on Wikipedia for years, right? In a way that it becomes abundantly clear if you track their activities. This is not a lone person. This is not a single person. This is a conglomerate. This is a group of individuals using one account to push their narrative and to defame the rest of us who are pushing back against it.
Yeah, well, we're told, Wyatt, that he's an autistic jazz enthusiast. So I don't know where you're getting this conspiracy theory that managed to do 250,000 edits or something during that window. I mean, incredibly talented, a savant. What can we say? That's probably what Philip Cross is, or
the Rain Man of slander.
There's 200 Philip Crosses working in a boiler room somewhere for British intelligence. Wyatt Reed, managing editor of the Grayzone. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and also your insights on this very important issue. As we're not alone, there's a lot of people suffering this same fate, and we want to raise these issues, bring light on them, so people are aware of what's going on. Really appreciate the work that you're doing and your great colleagues at the Grayzone. You guys are doing a great service to journalism. Wishing you all the best, and hopefully we can carry on this conversation in the future.
Thanks so much. And if I've got 1 second left, I will just say we are currently raising funds to resist this latest attack against us. So if you go to spotfund.com/WeFundTheGrayzone, if you're interested in helping support other independent media outlets beyond Patrick and his excellent program, please feel free to do so. We definitely appreciate all of our supporters, and I really appreciate you, Patrick, for having me on and highlighting this important issue.
And we'll drop your links in the TNT chat room as well, Wyatt, to our community there. Take care. Great work. And also big thank you in the first hour to Aya Ganame, the artist and the author, for her great contribution in the first hour. That's all we got time for. This is it. This is the week, ladies and gentlemen. It's gone by so fast. We've had some great segments, some great conversations. We're going to do it all again starting Monday. So stay with us, folks. We'll be with you in a couple of days. Enjoy the weekend. Stay on the network, though. State of the Nation coming up with Hesher and Timbo. Take care, you guys. All the best.